It seems that there are a lot of questions asked of you, and it has to be said that every story that is told has the answer to the questions that have been posed. And you might have recognized that in asking the question, what is the relationship between our auric field or our subtle emanation, our energy field, and this stillness that we find now in every moment of our life, is really the same question that's been asked the last several weeks. And that is, how do the laws of life, all the laws of creation, work in relationship to this one law, this law that is called the Dharma, the Tao, the will of God, the purpose of life? In fact, they're the same question. But you'll also recognize that in several of the stories that have been told of late, that there is no focal point. There's no hero or heroine around which the story revolves. So the hero or the heroine can be seen to be the center or the cause of what's happening within the framework of the story. And there's a very great purpose in that. So in this story this morning, which allows a question to be asked, it allows us now to move into that space where we have the ability to be able to see and experience that there is no center, there's no fixed point, there's no center point around which everything revolves. So our analogy or our metaphor of the cyclone no longer fits the place we're at. We have to move on. It's a story about several men, but the first man in our story is called Ting. He was called Ting Shu Wan or something like this, but we'll just call him Ting. And he was a very wealthy and also benevolent man. He was a trader of sorts, but he had great largesse. He shared his wealth around substantially. But then one day someone came to his door to announce that he would have to go to the magistrate and answer certain accusations that had been brought against him. It was in fact an accusation brought by someone who was jealous of him. But this person who had initiated this was quite high up in the hierarchy of the community, so he was able to pull the strings to bring Ting in to answer these accusations. So Ting decided to leave. He just left. He left his family, he left his home, he left everything, and went off to a far distant place. But of course, in this far distant place he had nothing. And he was sitting in a coffee shop, really pondering his fate, when by happenstance he met a young man who was having coffee, sharing a table with him, and they got into conversation, and Ting told him, the young man, his story. The young man said, well, I live in the house of my uncle, and we're not very rich, and my uncle is somewhat of a rover. He roams about, he's very social. But please come back to the house so we can offer you hospitality. So he went back to the house of this unknown man who was called Young, and he didn't meet the wife, but his needs were provided. He was given a bed to sleep on, his horse was given hay, And he was invited to stay in the house for as long as he cared to and needed to. Every day his horse was fed and he was provided with meals, but he never did meet the owner of the house or the master of the house. And when he asked, how can I say thank you to him, the nephew just said, oh, well, he's off, his business is that he has a little gambling den out. He makes a little money out of that to keep us going here. But he's also very social. He has a very wide network, and so we don't really see him too often. Now it came to Ting's attention, by messenger as these things do, that the person who was making the accusation against him had been transferred to another district. So there were nothing that he had to answer to anymore. So he went back to his home and resumed his life. But time went on, and the circumstances of Young and his family changed. He lost his little gambling den, and they became so poor that they hardly had enough food to put on the table. So one day, just in passing, Young's wife said to him, "Why don't you go and see Mr. Ting?" So he did. He made the journey to the place where Ting lived, and he was very ragged in his clothing. His shoes were falling apart. So when he was greeted at the gate by the servant, he was almost turned away. But Young told his story, and when Mr. Ting heard, "Oh, yes, of course, I remember. Invite him in." So Mr. Ting invited Mr. Young into the house and feasted him and feted him, gave him clothing, and of course Mr. Young was very grateful. And Mr. Ting said, "Stay as long as you like, you'll be well taken care of." But after a while, of course, Mr. Young was very concerned about his family, He said, thinking to himself, "I'm all right, but my family is starving back there. What's going to happen to them?" So he went to Mr. Ting and he said, "I'm so grateful for your hospitality and your help, but I'm worried about my family back there." He said, "Don't worry, it's all been taken care of." So Mr. Young took his leave and went back to his home. And there he found his wife, who had now a maidservant who was doing her every beckoning. And when Mr. Young asked, she said, "Oh, the day after you left, wagon loads came up to the door with food and clothing for us, and here we have an abundance. Our house is full." And after that, Mr. Young's life changed. He no longer had to go to his gambling den to make a little bit of money. In fact, before he'd left the house of Mr. Ting had arranged for a few of his friends to come together for a gambling session, and Mr. Young had made a killing, made many pieces of silver. He was set up for the rest of his life. And the story has an ending, and it starts with, "According to the teller of things strange." Now, if we were to complete this story, now in this place where the stillness allows us to view the laws of life in all its levels, dimensions, before and after. What is it that arises out of this story for us as an awareness? What is? Is there a center? Is there a force working in this story? What is it? What's the underlying core that you might recognize? Sure, we can see it from the levels of the morals and good works and so, but it's not so clear as that now for us. This cause and effect and all those other things are not so defined. Just like those dimensions of mind. There's 3 levels of mind. Subtle levels. Body, speech and mind. Appearances. The body of appearance, speech of vibrations, and the mind of awareness. We can no longer find delineations between those levels. They all seem to meld. What does it all mean for us now? Stillness. Does stillness denote a fixed point? Does stillness denote a separateness? We are sitting here and the movement of life is going on out there. How is it working for us? What is this stillness? More than it seems, isn't it? We're no longer that eye of the cyclone around which the winds swirl in different directions, carrying the washing machine and the bath and the roof, plonking it down somewhere else. Not like that, is it? So we have to go deeper into what it is that stillness is. And at first, if we can glean from these stories the deep meaning, the answer that's there for us, it helps us to be able to bring to mind an understanding. And we need to, because it needs to be imparted. So what is it about this story? Teller of things strange says, how would you finish this sentence relative to this story?
Like when we accept the nothing, because we don't have anything like this of Ting, then we will be provided for.
Yes.
Just as we need it.
Yes. So put that into words that would finish this sentence. The teller of things strange says that.
Accepting nothingness
all
that
be provided. And that takes us deeper into that law that's being spoken about, isn't it? So we have the answer right there. Yes, but karma is movement. In karma, where does the stillness come in then? Karma is the movement. What happens to karma? That which you perceive as karma, when it meets this these laws of life work in relationship to this? What is the relationship between our electromagnetic field, chemistry of our being, which interacts with all of life, and this? So using the breath as a wonderful point, we can take it further to the in-breath and the out-breath and see where it leads.
And it's not just what's happening here. That, like when the man, when he leaves, it's all that happens around that intertwines and affects.
Absolutely.
All of us. Whoever is there from the whoever it affects.
Which are all the different laws at play, because you could say all of those individuals represent an element of the laws of life.
And so my brain goes to quantum, it's entangled.
It's entangled, yes. If you want to use that language, it's entangled.
They have actually found and photographed now the moment when the quantum field, the stillness, it's moved.
Oh, it's happening.
And the stiller we are, the more places we can be at one time.
At one time. Yes. And so these multi-levels of mind that we were talking about last week.
It's like the ripples in the ocean.
Yes.
The ripples are many, just one moment.